Doctors who have given a second opinion diagnosis. What is the worst first opinion you've ever encountered? Not me, but my mom. She was always exhausted, the type of exhaustion that she'd have a bath, be so tired from it, she'd sleep on the bath mat when she got out. Went to her doctor, told her, "Oh, you're just depressed, go get a haircut." She did, still exhausted. Went back to the doctor. Continued to tell her she's just depressed, get a hobby, it's all in her head, etc. Never sent her for blood work, never referred her to any specialist. Months later she goes back. Her doctor is on vacation. Physician reliving her doctor takes one look at her eyes and says, "It's your liver. Get these blood tests now." Abnormal blood work and a liver biopsy later, she was told she had autoimmune hepatitis and was 3 months from death. After she improved with medications, she went back to the original doctor and said, "I didn't need a haircut." 27 years later she still suffers from lingering effects. I'm a lawyer, but had a client given a devastating diagnosis of an extremely rare heart condition. Doctor told him he had 6 weeks to live. He contacted me to make his will and set his affairs in order. Thankfully, he sought a second opinion with an extremely well-known cardiologist. I guess the cardiologist was intrigued due to the rare nature of this heart condition. There was nothing wrong with him. He was fine. This poor guy, and his family, were tortured over this, so devastated and terrified, for nothing. He actually called me to tell me all of this. He seemed to be still in the joyous, "I'm not going to die" stage, but I imagine anger comes at some point, when you take stock of what you went through. I don't know how a doctor fucks up that massively, or if somehow my client's results were mixed up with someone else's, and some poor bastard's number is almost up and they don't even know it. Well, when I first started feeling sick the October of 1 year at college, I had 1. A non-productive cough, 2. Night sweats and trouble sleeping, and 3. I had lost some weight. The school nurse gave me Claritin. All of those symptoms got worse, plus I was incredibly fatigued, my lymph nodes swelled up, and I had pretty bad backaches. My GP took a chest x-ray and prescribed antibiotics for pneumonia. At this point I had almost failed out of school because I was only managing an hour or 2 of sleep per night. It took until spring break for me to go see a pulmonary specialist. He could instantly tell that it wasn't pneumonia. I had stage 4B Hodgkin's lymphoma. My first PET scan showed cancerous cells and lymph nodes in all 4 quadrants of my body. At this point I had lost about a third of my body weight. The cough, weight loss, and back pain were my swollen lymph nodes pressing on my lungs, stomach, and my back. They gave me my first round of chemo, and I genuinely felt incredible. I felt like such shit that in 4 mixture of carefully measured toxins was an improvement. I went home and ate a whole pizza. Chemo got shittier, but it worked, so I guess I can't complain too much. Not a doctor, but my mom went into a walk-in clinic and told the doc she had really bad headaches all the time. She was a stay-at-home mom to me, 10, and my sister, 6, so it was written off as stress and got a prescription for pain pills. 2 weeks later the headaches were migraines. Stronger prescription and tried to reduce stress. A few weeks go by and she can no longer get out of bed, throws everything up including the meds, is completely disoriented and barely alive. My dad was a truck driver, so he was never home. I was taking care of me, my sister, and my mom all by myself. We go back to the doctor and this lady had the audacity to say this is the weirdest migraine case she's ever seen. Tells her to take warm baths and just keep taking the meds when she throws them up. 2 months go by and my dad came home, saw the condition of my mother, who was so sick she would urinate herself, the house, which was being kept up by a 10-year-old, and said he wanted a divorce. That night we found out she had stage 4 lung and brain cancer with a tumor the size of an egg pressing on her brain as well as many others scattered throughout. I still haven't forgiven that doctor for not taking my mom seriously. As far as my mom goes, she fought hard for 2 years, eventually passing in November 2010. I was 13 and my sister was 9. My dad fell out of a tree about a month after her diagnosis and shattered his heel. He became disabled because of the surgeries it required and his back. He was a monster while I was home. All I remember from my younger years was walking on eggshells, constantly being accused of things I didn't do, and being watched like a hawk 24/7. I suspect he is bipolar and has severe PTSD, But you know how older people feel about treating mental illnesses. As for us, it sucked not having our mom growing up. She talked every day about how she couldn't wait to beat cancer and leave my dad so we could all have the life we deserved. I think we turned out fairly well. I'm 23, have a family, moved far away from all of those memories, and have committed to breaking cycles and loving my children the way I wish I would have been loved. Patient. When I was in college, I went to the doctor because I was pissing razors. It progressed pretty rapidly, and by the end of the week I couldn't walk or sleep. The doc asked me about my sex life, and I told him the truth that my girlfriend and I had only been with each other and together for many years. He sorta scoffed at that and told me it was likely chlamydia. Had a long condescending speech about safe sex with me and sent me home. A week later my piss tests were back. Turns out I had the worst bladder infection they'd ever seen. I had to have a camera shoved up my pee hole, multiple rounds of antibiotics, and to this day I struggle to pee due to irreversible damage the infection caused. I have one that happened to me. I did college gymnastics. My senior year I had an accident in practice landing in my neck. Went to the hospital, got x-rays, was told I was perfectly fine. Walked around in pain for a while. Weeks later went to another doc, got a new set of images. My neck was broken in 3 places and had a dislocation. Had a multi-level fusion surgery days later. Found out my X-days got swapped with someone else's in the ER, and I was originally diagnosed based on someone else's images. This was found out when I went to get my records long after my surgery for insurance purposes, and my files had someone else's medical records and images in it. Because of the time I spent walking around with it, I had to have a posterior surgery instead of anterior, which is way more invasive and gives me major issues to this day. Not a doctor, but I went to a dermatologist for a rash on my hands and face. He insisted it was eczema even though I've never had eczema on my life. He refused to do any testing or take a biopsy. He prescribed me a steroid cream for eczema. The rash spread and got horribly worse. It was all up my arms and all over my face. It was itchy and painful. I went to a different dermatologist and explained the situation. They took a biopsy. It was a bacterial infection, and the first doctor essentially gave me a bacterial infection on steroids. I was a minor at the time, and I don't know why my parents didn't go after the first doctor. Not a doctor. My husband had a situation where he almost died because of a misdiagnosis. To preface this, at the time we were young, in our mid-20s, living in a college town. My husband had horrible pain, on floor, on hands and knees, horrible. We went to the ER and the doctor barely looked at him and just told him to stop drinking and he would be fine. We go home, the pain is getting worse and now he is vomiting. As soon as the doctor's off opens back home where we grew up, we drove 1.5 hours to see our primary care. Within 15 minutes of walking into the GP office, my husband was rushed to emergency surgery. His gallbladder had completely ruptured and he was going septic. It was a total mess, and he almost died, all because of a misdiagnosis. I went to a walk-in clinic because I couldn't swallow anything. The doctor pressed on my forehead and asked if it hurt. I guess kind of. He told me I had a sinus infection and prescribed me antibiotics, that I couldn't swallow, and sent me on my way. Turns out I had had a stroke and ended up spending 3 weeks in the hospital. Not a doctor, but my sister was suffering from headaches and minor seizures for a while. Went to an urgent care, and that told us she had an anxiety disorder and just needed something to calm her down. We got a second opinion at the ER, and turns out she had stage 4 brain cancer. I miss her every day. Told by my doctor my health issues were stress-related. The second opinion found my gallbladder was functioning at 3% and had that sucker removed a couple weeks later. What's worse is I specifically asked the first doctor about gallbladder, and they assured me it couldn't be that. Not a doctor. My sister was about 2 weeks away from giving birth when she suddenly started feeling excruciating pain and vomiting. I called her midwife, who refused to speak with me despite my sister clearly not capable of speaking, as she sat on the floor next to the toilet, crying and puking. Finally, she just took the phone and was told by her midwife that it was probably just a virus and to eat a popsicle. Eventually, I was able to convince her to go to the ER. She was immediately rushed in the OR for an emergency C-section. Her placenta had abrupted and my niece was born not breathing, suffered several seizures and even died, and then was resuscitated. She is now 15 and has cerebral palsy due to going so long without the oxygen she needed. Obligatory. I am not the doctor, but I'm the patient. I went to a sleep doctor because I was constantly tired and falling asleep standing up and such. Serious shit. Doctor was like, well, you're overweight, so it's definitely sleep apnea. I did a sleep study, came back negative for sleep apnea. Doctor was like, well, I'm still positive it's sleep apnea, 'cause you're a fatty. So he sent me home with a CPAP machine for a month. After a month of using the machine, which records your sleep apnea events every night, and still said I didn't have sleep apnea, and with me having zero improvement in any of my symptoms, I went back to him, and he said, well, if this isn't working, I can't help you, because you obviously have sleep apnea since all tabas have sleep apnea, so you must not be using the CPAP. So I dropped him like a fresh turf and went to get a second opinion. New sleep doc, new sleep study. Come back in and the new doctor's like, yeah, this is textbook narcolepsy. You have all the symptoms and the sleep study proves it beyond a shadow of a doubt. I told him about the other doctor and he said, this is obviously narcolepsy. Your previous doctor was a moron, and unlike the other quotes in this story, that is an actual, direct quote. I'll never forget the look of disgust on his face when he said the word moron. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.